Hey everybody, welcome back to the M&M podcast, and we're here with another guest star, Bennett. He's back. Welcome back, Bennett. How you doing?
All right, how are you?
Good, good. Mitch, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. You'll remember Bennett from our classic Beatles and Stones episode.
Mm.
So he's back to talk underappreciated bands and artists. Now, we've all brought a couple to the table, but there were some we mentioned in our last episode that we wanted to hit. So let's just start with one of them, the Stone Roses. Alex, you hadn't heard of the Stone Roses.
I
You
have
listened
not
to a few
heard.
songs.
Yeah, I have not heard of them, and you two, you guys were taken off of Stone Roses and Oasis, and so I do my homework. Stone Roses, never heard of them before, but honestly, really good band, and it fits in with like I was talking the power ballads of the '90s because I know they were in like '89 and '94 were their big two studio albums, but
Their only studio albums.
only studio, well, the big ones and only ones, yeah.
Mhm.
But like I didn't know I'd be listening to 8 minute long songs, but they were really
Yeah.
it was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, they
And
got a couple of those. And that's part of like it's one of my favorite albums, honestly. Because it's very unique. It's so different to like a lot of the artists like nowadays where songs are kind of exactly fit to a formula of like a certain time, a certain structure in terms of like verse, chorus, and so on. Whereas this album was kind of just like five guys in Manchester jamming out, making songs, and it ended up like becoming a significant cultural sort of phenomenon during that time in the UK. Bennett, what are your thoughts on the Stone Roses first album?
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I've listened to it. But yeah, no, it's really unique for its time period. I totally agree, Mitch. It's definitely something you would never hear today. I just like the interesting different mix of kind of styles they were going for on the record, which you didn't hear other bands hit on too much. Like, they're obviously very Beatles influenced, but they're also like taking like modern dance, like what was contemporary dance music at the time, and applying some of those kind of break beats to some of their songs. And yeah, they were just seemed like very like it was, yeah, it's really kind of eclectic kind of mix of sounds and styles they're going for, which makes a pretty unique outcome.
For sure. And I think that's part of why I love it is like if someone asked me to kind of describe it or give a comparison to another band, like I don't really know what I would say. And
Mhm.
it's almost like they're one of those bands where the sum, like the band is greater than the sum of its parts. Like I know the lead singer Ian Brown, like some people think he has like a really great voice in that first album. Some people think he cannot sing at
Yeah.
all. I, I might agree with the latter, but it works perfectly within that album. Like it's that soft and
Yeah.
just it sounds really nice with the music, and I feel like that's what drives the band
Mhm.
is the music as opposed to the vocals. Like a lot of bands and the like the hooks, it's more the music with that album.
Yeah, I would agree.
So Alex, I sent you a few songs. The one in particular I would say is my favorite, and I think kind of perfectly encapsulates the album is I'm the Resurrection because it's a unique song. The lyrics and kind of the like message or the story of the song is very unique. Like there's some strange lyrics if you pick them out. But overall it's just so smooth, and like the last 3 minutes of the song is basically just a jam session, yet it still sounds great.
Mm. Yeah, because I am the Resurrection. That was I threw on the songs just on my headphones. I was doing work around the house today just to learn about them, and halfway through the song, it completely switched up, and I thought it went to a different song, and I was like, "What?" So I checked my phone. I just checked the song, and it was same song because it is like an 8 minute song. But yeah, I focused a lot on the music rather than the lyrics, so I got to go back and listen to it because I know on the first run by of songs I listen to, I listen to the music first. If it catches
Mhm.
me, that hook. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, Bennett, out of the three songs I think Mitch sent me, let's see which one I had.
You may not even remember the individual songs, Bennett. Do you though? Like maybe one or two that stood out when you listened to the album?
The two that always stood out for me, I'm just pulling it up here again on my laptop.
Hmm.
That is the first one, I Want to Be Adored, and then
Yeah.
third song, Waterfall.
Oh, I love Water.
I
Yeah, I
love
mean,
Waterfall. That's
I
like that was a song that got me hooked onto them, and yeah. Also, the
mhm.
song right after it, "Don't Stop," I think isn't that just Waterfall in reverse? Like the
Yeah,
whole
Wait,
Don't
what?
Stop. Don't Stop is a weird one
yeah,
because you're right. The music, I don't know exactly if it's reversed, but it's very similar. Like when you listen to the two back to back, you'll
yeah,
notice it's almost like Don't Stop is like a muffled, more like hardcore sort of sound, and then different lyrics. But yeah, Waterfall's a great song. That's definitely
Mhm.
one that I like having a playlist. And I want to be adored. The intro is fantastic. Like the way it builds, it's such a great live song. That's like it's funny because that's their number one song, like on Spotify, which is perfect for that band because like they weren't trying to make hits. It's quite clear. Like that song is literally like a 2 minute intro, and then just like I don't have to sell my soul. He's already in me. Like that's it.
yeah,
And then like a little chorus, and then they keep playing music,
yeah.
and that's like their number one hit because
I
it
was,
just like the music
yeah.
is so powerful.
I was gonna say though, you could see like a song like "I Want to Be Adored." You can see like a direct influence on like Oasis then with like a song that they did a few years later, like Columbia or something.
Mm-hmm.
They just like have that kind of jam thing that they're doing, and then they just have like this one line that they kind of repeat over it, and it kind of just goes through kind of cycles. And but
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's really not at all about the words.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of
And
this is kind of one or two line thing that they repeat for a while.
for sure. And that's part of why I love it is like you have songs like that are like strictly driven by the music. And they have some other songs where if you actually like read the lyrics and like look up the meaning to some of the stuff they're talking about are like kind of deep and unique, like some biblical references, some references to like Roman gods and stuff,
Yeah,
Mhm.
which you're not expecting for like these like five druggy Manchester kids like who put a band together, right? Like they
mm,
weren't like this studio plant like found these guys and put them together. Like
sure,
they were
yeah,
like just like proper like group of friends from Northwest England who happened to form a band, and it became really significant to the culture. Like even today, like young people in that, like a lot of them just absolutely like adore them. Um, but they're really not known at all in North America. Like we talked about that on the last episode.
Yeah, I've never
I
heard
wonder
of
how their
heard of them.
popularity is in continental Europe,
Mhm.
like in like France or Germany or something like that. Like, because I find that can sometimes be interesting if sometimes bands are huge in the UK and that they don't
Mhm.
really make it at all in North America, and then Europe can somewhere lie somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
Or sometimes it's like North America, they're just not known there. They're just strictly a UK kind of band. But
yeah. And part of it too is just like the music they made isn't like Oasis, and we love Oasis, but like Oasis music, like a lot of their songs are extremely palatable to almost anyone. Like
yeah.
Don't Look Back in Anger, anyone can listen to that song and like it,
Mhm.
potentially. Whereas the Stone Roses music is much more like a bit of an acquired taste, like a bit of you kind of have to know what you're getting into going in. And that's probably part of why they weren't as popular. Even if you look at like some of the streaming numbers, like nowadays, is
Yeah.
not very big. But they definitely had a significant impact in the UK. But it is funny how like a band who had like the number one album, it's in like if you look at lists of best like English albums of all time. Like they're in it with their
Yeah.
self-titled first album. Yet even like big music fans in North America like wouldn't have heard of them, which is kind of cool.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess that could kind of bring us, Alex, to one of the other. This is a solo artist that I kind of wanted to bring up
Mhm.
because we mentioned how like people can be underrated in different ways. Like Stone Roses, you could say, are underrated sort of geographically, where they were kind of only big in the UK and Europe. Whereas, like, I wanted to talk about Linda Ronstadt, who was big in her time, but I feel like over the decades hasn't gotten the recognition I think she deserves. And you think of that era and location where she was making her music, there were so many big artists and well-respected artists that came out of it. Like she was part of sort of that Laurel Canyon troubadour sort of group of young musicians in LA, like the Eagles, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown, but I feel like she didn't get the same recognition. Now maybe that's because she wasn't as good, but I think vocally, she's fantastic. Bennett, are you familiar with Linda Ronstadt?
Yeah, I know her a little bit. I know some of her big songs. Like I know she gave like the Eagles their start. Like didn't Don Henley and Glenn Frey kind of meet playing in her band kind of thing?
Yeah,
I
I think
know.
I think Bernie Ledden might have played in it as well, but
Oh, okay,
for
cool.
sure those two.
Yeah. I can't. It's been a while since I've seen that History of the Eagles doc. So I've been actually I've been wanting to watch it again, but I can't find it anywhere. So
Oh,
Yeah,
that's homework for me. I still have to watch that because we
it,
talked about the Eagles not long ago on the podcast, so I got to watch that
yeah.
documentary. So
It's a great dog. Like I am a pretty big Eagles fan, but I feel like anyone who likes music and likes music from that time, it's just a great doc. But
yeah,
yeah, like I made a note of that too. Like pretty cool how the Eagles probably wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Linda Ronstadt, because that's how for sure Glenn Frey and Don Henley met.
yeah.
Um, and they obviously went on to become one of the biggest American bands of all time. But yeah, she's got some great songs. It's usually like sort of like love songs.
Yeah, the
Um,
one I'm familiar with is "You're No Good" because it's this first song off Van Halen 2. They covered it.
oh,
I have that album. I didn't know
Yeah,
that was
Linda
hers.
Ronstadt. Yeah, that's kind of like when I was really young. I was like, I asked my dad, it's like, oh, who wrote this song? Because I knew Van Halen didn't write all their own stuff in those first number of records. They did a lot of covers, and yeah, and it was like, oh, Linda Ronstadt, and that name kind of stuck. But yeah, I definitely know that song really well.
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's really cool, Mitch, how you said it was like she did like the kind of the love songs because the "You're
Mhm.
No Good" is kind of like the opposite of that kind of thing. It was
Yeah.
like the
Well, it's like love songs or sort of relationship songs in a
about
good or
yeah
bad way. Like
yeah
some can be sweet and like nice, and others are like sad and kind of retrospective. But one thing for sure, like if you listen to her, just like some of her greatest at whatever, like her voice is fantastic. Like she had such a powerful voice. She was similar to the bands I mentioned, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, like that sort of thing, where she had
But
a little bit of that
that's Southern
southern.
California 70s sound, yeah.
Yeah, it's like country rock. Like it's rock with a little hint of country, soft rock. Um, and so if anyone likes like the Byrds, those sort of bands, like I'd give her a chance. And vocally, I think she's fantastic. And she's actually caught on a little bit more. I haven't seen the show, but I saw that like one of her songs was in The Last of Us on
Oh,
HBO, which
really?
is like
yeah.
one of the huge shows on right now.
Mm.
And that's become a little bit of a trend where like people get introduced to these great songs. Like you saw that with Stranger Things. Oh,
It
who
was
was the artist?
Kate Bush's song,
Kate
right?
Metallica.
Bush
Yeah, running up
and
that hill.
Metallica, both.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say,
Metallica.
like, Master of Puppets started charting again because of that fucking show.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
and now all like I heard my little brother heard some of his friends be like, oh, the Stranger Things song, and I was like, what? And then I had to
Yeah.
check it out. I'm like, oh, it's the Kate Bush song. And then they said Master of Puppets. Like, you know that rock song from Stranger Things? And I'm like, from
Yeah.
Stranger Things? And then, so that
Yeah.
was kind of interesting to hear the new generation getting like
Yeah.
exposed
Yeah.
to that.
And that's one thing like I kind of wanted to ask you guys was sort of just like because it's a bit of a debate where it's like, is it good that people are getting introduced to these songs through shows like Stranger Things or The Last of Us? And to me, I would say, obviously, it's a little bit like I find it a little bit lame just because it's like really you found out about Metallica through Stranger Things, but at the bottom line, if young people, like especially kids, are getting introduced to like good music, however it happens, to me, like it doesn't really matter in the end as long as they find it and then maybe they branch out and look for other artists from that time. Alex, you said you had a different opinion to me, so I'd love to hear it.
No, I did, but I was gonna say, Bennett, what are your thoughts on that? I would go with Bennett first. What do you
I
think
kind of
with
agree
the
with Mitch. I mean, like the second half of what Mitch said, I really think it's like no matter how they're getting introduced to this stuff, it's just it's a positive because the
Mhm.
music's good. We know it's good. The people of that generation, aka our parents, know it's good.
Mhm.
So it's cool that kids would get into it. It doesn't matter how. I would say maybe a TV show is a little bit cooler than a TikTok.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was gonna get
It's
into that
also
too.
though
Some of the
it's being curated then by the director of that show.
Mhm.
Versus TikTok is totally natural, usually.
Mhm.
Like that dreams ocean spray, ocean, drinking the cranberry juice and listening
Yeah.
Oh,
Fleetwood
yeah.
Mac
to
song.
that huge TikTok trend.
Yeah,
Like
and-
that was totally just by random that thing took off, wasn't it? Not like I don't
Yeah.
think there was really any big science behind that.
It was
Yeah.
totally random. And little side note, that guy got, I think, free like Ocean Spray juice for life kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think, I think
he
that's
got a bunch of stuff out of that.
That was a great thing though. Like that just like people TikTok like were like, yeah, Dreams is a great song. I mean it.
Yeah.
Is. I mean I've heard it a little too many times.
Yeah.
But like,
That's
I guess
kind of like TikTok's a little bit kind of like the way people find their new music. I mean it's become a kind of a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, and I mean, what makes that different to radio? Like, I can assure
That's
you,
what I was gonna say. It's not
in
that much
this-
different.
like in the 70s and 80s, particularly the 80s when radio really took off, like for music, they were playing the same bands and songs over and over and over again for the most part. So I guess TikTok's really no different. Like when I think of when I hear songs on TikTok that I like, I'm a little bit like, oh, like I don't want this to like get overplayed in that.
Yeah, I know that.
And that was my opinion on it. So like my thing is like I see the upsides and the downsides because I totally agree with you guys. The upside is like artists get like discovered and they, a whole generation of listeners are gonna get involved in it. But the downside I see is people associating that song with the piece of media it's coming out with. So you see like, oh, it's the Stranger Things song. And so the artist, yeah, they're listening to it, but is the artist getting the recognition from the song that they kind of deserve? And also, does the song kind of like burn bright and fast and then fade away? And then it just gets associated with that piece of media. Like, I was going to say like, one of them was the other unappreciated band I was getting into was the Vampire Weekend. And so they talked about, there's a song called Campus and that just blew up on TikTok for a huge trend. And now people just hear it as like the TikTok song. Whereas would that get people into that band or are they just going to say, oh, that's just like a TikTok song? So that was kind of the downside I see to it, but I do see the whole like artists are getting discovered from it. So
I hear you, Alex, on that. Like I would though make the argument just to counter it, like if the person though knows it as say what they know it as the Stranger Things song, as long as they've added it to the library, Metallica's getting that recognition because they're getting the plays, they're getting the streams, they're getting that like decimal of a cent off that stream or whatever it is. Like,
that's fair. Yeah, I just think my argument
doesn't matter if locally amongst their friends.
That's true.
Know the Stranger Things song. They hang out with some cooler people. They'll start knowing it's Master of Puppets by Metallica. You know,
I think my problem lies in more with like burning bright and fast. So instead of it just like being appreciated, it's like it explodes for like 6 months, and then people are just like, oh, I'm tired of that song. Instead of like
and that's fair. That's definitely fair.
But that's true. The artists do get the recognition eventually when they get the clicks, they get in the cultural sphere. So yeah, that makes sense.
And you could also make the point like that might not be as new a phenomenon as we think. Obviously TikTok is, but I'm sure there are songs, and there's one that comes to mind to me where you see it in a movie or a show or several movies, and then the song almost goes away as a piece of art and just becomes like, oh, that's about this. It's like for me, it was like Fortunate Son. When you hear that, you're just like Vietnam War movie. Vietnam War movie.
I watched the other day, and I just couldn't help but think of napalm like falling all around.
Like you hear the song, you hear the song, and you just picture like a jungle and helicopters flying in and like fire and everything.
Yeah, I remember.
Even though like it's a great song, but because it's been played so much and has been in so many like Vietnam War movies, you almost laugh when you think about it because you just picture the same thing.
They even used it in Tropic Thunder. I saw it not long ago, and of course they had like because it's a spoof on the Vietnam.
Right, that was a meme essentially before a meme was, but they're making a meme out of it. Like
exactly.
So yeah, and like overall, I think we all kind of came to the same conclusion. There's pros and cons, but I mean, whatever brings people to the music is good, right? In the end. So I guess we could get to another band, and this one isn't like if people from the UK were watching this, they would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Yeah. Underrated, but we wanted to talk about Oasis because Oasis, like the Stone Roses, now Oasis is 12 times bigger than the Stone Roses, but they're a bit similar in the sense that, like other bands, they were massive in the UK. Like they were probably like the closest thing after like post the British invasion era of band to those bands in popularity. Yet in North America, they weren't never really got that big. Um, and their music after the first two albums is pretty much ignored by most people who aren't like diehard Oasis fans. So, Bennett, I guess what do you think was the reason they didn't catch on anywhere near as much as they did in like Europe and really the rest of the world as they did, or as they didn't do in North America?
Yeah. Yeah, because Oasis is interesting because like it's really the rest of the world is quite big on Oasis,
Oh yeah,
except for North America. And I would make the argument that Canada is bigger into Oasis than the States are.
agreed.
Um, I think there's a few things. I mean, first off, it's always the music. The music's very British. It's not very inspired by American music. And like a lot of those big like the British invasion bands you mentioned, they were a British band inspired by American music.
Yeah, blues
Oasis
for
was a
sure.
British band inspired by British music.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think also at the time they did a terrible job at promoting themselves in the US, and that's partially just because of their difference in attitudes. They were not, as you watch in the Supersonic documentary, they had tons of problems when they came over. Like their first show in Los Angeles, they were all strung out on meth.
Mhm.
Couldn't get to
All right,
stay.
fair enough. Yeah.
Or right after Nebworth there, they come over to promote What's the Story. Liam doesn't even come over because he's too busy looking for a house, and then Noel quits halfway through. You
Mhm.
had shit like that going on that really kind of gave him a very kind of bush league, kind of very amateur hour kind of image over in the States, that they weren't like a legit band. Because they
Mhm.
would do this kind of stuff. Liam's constant walking off like at the MTV Unplugged thing, not doing it because his throat was sore, and then you see him upstairs smoking and drinking, and then
And heckling Noel.
Noel. Like it's so stupid. Like that stuff plays off great in Britain, but Americans just see that as just complete unprofessionalism, and they're like,
Yeah.
"What? Like that's like, what are you doing?"
Just the
Versus the
British
British,
humor didn't
like that's
translate.
fucking punk rock,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think
Yeah.
that's a big thing. Like, and then at the time they didn't like their songs got big on the radio, but then the people who like really were got into those songs went out bought the CDs or the tapes, and then got tickets to go see them, and then their show gets canceled because Liam's looking for a house and Noel's like, "Fuck it, I'm going back home." Like
Yeah,
how would you feel as a fan? You'd feel kind of like
for sure.
Yeah, like I followed
guys,
you, I came to the concert, and then
yeah, they're not gonna have the time for me. Why am I not gonna? I'm not gonna make time for them. Like,
Yeah. Or even you go to the concert and you can't wait to hear like Slide Away or Supersonic or something like that. And it ends up being Noel who's singing it because
right?
Liam's throat's hurting. And like
Yeah,
Noel's great for his songs, but Liam's got that something for the like heavier stuff where, it can't compare. And those were
that's
great points
yeah.
for like why they didn't make it as much in America. And another point I think like when I was just thinking about it to myself, like why didn't it translate as much? And I thought of like you look at the time period of music in the US when Oasis was at their peak, which is like early mid 90s to like 2000. The music at the time in the US was primarily grunge, and then later in the 90s was like new metal.
Yeah.
So like the biggest bands were like Nirvana, Pearl Jam. Then you had bands like Rage Against the Machine, Metallica. Then the even more kind of out there like Korn, Limp Bizkit. Like watch the Woodstock '99 documentary.
Yeah,
You'll
yeah.
find out all
Mhm.
about that. So I feel like the American music listener at the time, culturally, you had like the grunge and the metal, which obviously meant something to like people in America at the time, where they were like kind of fed up of sort of like corporations and just like sort of cookie cutter music. Not that that was Oasis, but I think they were just sick of like soft music. Like they wanted to be angry, they wanted to be angsty, right?
And also
And
the
so
Oasis got lumped in with the Britpop package along with the Spice Girls. And when trying to get marketed along with the Spice Girls in a place, it's kind of like you can't take them again. And it adds to the you can't take them seriously
mhm,
kind of
Mm.
mind.
for sure. And if you've only heard Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, and Live Forever,
Mm-hmm.
and you're into Rage Against the Machine,
Yeah.
You're gonna be like, oh, you're just gonna discard it. You're gonna be like, oh, that's
Those are the
soft, like
softer ones,
whiny
yeah.
music. Like I
Maybe
made
you're a rock
TikToks.
and roll star, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
like
that's how I got into Oasis, was those songs. Like Mitch, the ones you said specifically, that's what got me into them. Then I listened to a little of the heavier stuff. So
And like I made TikToks like about Oasis like for our account. And I remember getting a comment from obviously like some American who's like 55, and he's like, are there any Oasis songs where they don't sound like whiny bitches? And then like because there's a good amount of British people who follow us, and they were like come on man or whatever, and it's like
here's the
Oasis,
playlist.
like
Check it out. Like
Oasis, like a lot of their stuff is like sort of punk, like a little bit punk and a bit heavier. Yet, like you said, they just get like lumped into Britpop, which British people love. But I guess like as it was sort of marketed to Americans, they thought of like those super soft and poppy groups as opposed to like Oasis and the Verve and Blur or whoever, from that time.
Even like
Um,
bands like the Verve, like what was their big song? It was
yeah. Oh,
Bittersweet Symphony,
Symphony. Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
soft tune.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, if you don't like the violin, you won't like that one. But yeah, and even if you look at like even like real sort of like music people in North America, they probably don't know like many Oasis songs, if any, outside of their first two albums, definitely maybe and Morning Glory. Yet there's a lot of gems there,
yeah.
and I feel like some of the songs actually are much deeper than the ones from the other two albums. Yet people just like don't give it a chance because their third album kind of flopped. And I was going through their discography, and even the Master Plan. Now that album is full of songs that were like on mixtapes
Yeah,
and
B-side.
B-sides of like EPs and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're already pretty much released. But you look at the songs on there, that's an incredible album. Like you have the Master Plan, Acquiesce, Rockin' Chair, like just a ton of like great songs. Yeah. Again, most people probably have only heard the first two albums.
Yeah, no, there's great tunes on there.
Mhm.
They also like when they changed their lineup for the 2000 record, Stand on the Shoulders of Giants. They even had good stuff continuing into the 2000s, and it was different. But I would say there's at least there's a couple good tunes off every record of theirs that I
Mhm.
have on my phone and I listen to on a regular basis.
For
And
sure.
I mean, I think Be Here Now, like even though it was kind of, people don't like kind of panic because of what came before it, but I have the
Yeah.
whole album on my phone. I love it. I think it's great.
It's a fun album. Like it's a very cocky album, some of the songs, which I enjoy. Like that's part of why I love Oasis,
Yeah, I
is
like the
like
confidence.
part of it is like I'm not like the most confident person. So seeing other people who are just like, fuck you, I don't care, I'm doing this. It's like, yeah, man. Like, yeah, like go on. And so I find it endearing, but yeah, and sometimes it's just like the time and place sort of thing, right? Like I feel like sort of I mentioned like you mentioned the promoting, that's for sure. And then also just like what Americans were into at the time, right? Like if the Oasis came around in the 80s, maybe they would have been like a much bigger band. Obviously it would have sounded a bit different, but
Yeah,
we'll just we get some other bands. Actually, Bennett, do you have an underappreciated band that have
sure. Yeah, I came with like two just to like kind of off the top of my head. The first underappreciated artist is from, it works well with the last episode I was on, Beatles and the Stones, because this guy was the only one to ever get credit for playing on both bands' records. But he had a really cool solo career that kind of flashes very under the radar. He's very much known for playing on the Stones records, playing on Beatles records, playing on everyone under the sun in that time period, George Harrison, all the Beatles solo stuff and stuff like that. His name's Billy Preston. You see him a bit in the Get Back documentary playing keyboards with the Beatles there up on the roof.
yeah, that name sounds very familiar. Billy Preston.
But he had some really great stuff, like great kind of R&B, kind of funk soul kind of music in the 70s. I love a lot of his songs. The biggest one being Will It Go Around in Circles? And then some other big ones like Nothing from Nothing, Out of Space, That's Life. Yeah, really good stuff. He's very kind of gospel kind of influence in there too. So if you like, I've got a couple of his like full records, and
Mhm.
like some of the popular hits that like, you know, that he would like promote as singles and stuff. Then you have some like religious kind of tunes,
Mhm.
and then you have some like covers of like Beatles stuff that he's doing his own rendition of.
Was,
So it's
yeah,
pretty,
was
yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I just thought it fit in well with the last episode I was on, since he
For
played.
sure.
That's how he's known, as the guy who played with both.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, in terms of like his own work,
like
as
it's as a solo artist, right?
yeah, it's kind of
underappreciated.
underappreciated. He even got like guys from the Stones and the Beatles and stuff like to play on his own solo records, because he'd play on their records and then he'd call them up and go and play on his records. But
So if I had to pick a couple songs, like top 2 or 3, what would you say I should listen to now to like?
yeah, my favorite's Nothing from Nothing. There's a really good instrumental track called Out of Space, as I was talking about. That's really funky song. And yeah, the big ones, Will It Go Round in Circles. You actually sometimes hear that on the radio, like on like a boom kind of thing.
I'm gonna look that up right now. I wish I could play music on the podcast here, except we're
Yeah.
gonna get copyright strike unless I change the pitch and stuff. But
Well,
we're
that's
not
the
gonna do
beauty
that
of
to
like
his music.
that's the beauty of discussions like this, you know. That's how you find new music. Because
Mhm.
I know for me, I sometimes get into a lull where I sort of listen to the same stuff over and over too much. So it's great to get new stuff. Just to finish up, Bennett, who was the other band or artist you felt was underappreciated?
Yeah, the other one was actually a band I've never really heard anyone talk about, except having conversations with my parents because they liked them at the time. It's this 80s English band, similar to like Stone Roses and Oasis. They like very English, didn't get really any press or attention in America. Even Europe was kind of eh. They're called the Style Council. They're made up of Paul Weller was their like the like lead singer kind of
He was
main.
from the Jam, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is like he broke up the Jam kind of at like their height in the early 80s, like pretty big band at the time. And then started this thing, the Style Council, which is like kind of like artsy music, like artsy pop music. It's kind of like taking influences from jazz and then the electronic dance music. Like it's like taking like all this stuff. They're very much trying to be non-conforming to whatever was happening. Even though a lot, you know, like their popular stuff sounds very from 83 or 84 or whenever it would be released, but they were constantly changing their sound from record to record. They're constant like in their even on their records there wasn't like a kind of a sound that they would do, you know, some like kind of slow stuff, and then they would do some very dancey kind of weird whacked out stuff. And yeah, they're a cool band. um and yeah, they only were like kind of around from like 83 to 88 or something like that, and then they kind of went their separate ways. And yeah, they're a cool group. I saw this documentary on Crave, which I think was done by Showtime, but it's been since taken off of it. But it's called like Long Hot Summer, which was like one of their big songs. And yeah, it was a great documentary. That's how I got introduced to them a couple years ago. And like one of their songs was like one of my parents' wedding songs, so they always kind of played growing up. So I knew them a little bit, and then I started to discover some of their other stuff. And yeah, they're a really cool band.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I love getting introduced to bands from documentaries. I feel like that I'm such a sucker in that way. I'll watch a documentary about a band and then just listen to them like nonstop for like a week. But yeah, well, we'll leave it there, Bennett. Thanks for coming on. It was a great chat. Hopefully everyone got some new songs and new bands to check out, and that's kind of the point, right? We all love music, and it's always great to
Alex, we still got, I guess, still got a few minutes. Alex, what were your picks before we just fully sign off? If
Oh yeah, so my picks were Vampire Weekend, the Giant Rooks, and the Kooks. So to keep it on theme of the new, I feel like we kind of did a new wave British invasion kind of I think today, because we talked a lot of like UK bands. The Kooks is from the UK English pop rock band. So I think Bennett, you know the Kooks, right? The
heard of them, yeah.
heard them. Like I'd say Naive and Gap. Those are the 2 songs I'd say go for it. Like listen to those, especially Naive. That's the really good, like my favorite song. And Sweet Emotion. It's really good. Yeah, that's a really good one. So I say check out the Kooks. Nice English pop rock band. I say early 2000s. That's where we're from. And Vampire Weekend. I was thinking about underappreciated bands, and that I kind of like John actually helped me pick this one. I didn't realize how many hits they had that I knew of, but I didn't know the band. So this is like Harmony Hall, This Life, A Punk. Like those songs are like their top 3 big ones. So I'd say those are ones to check out too. So
Right on, cool.
and that'd be my pick.
I
And
know
yeah.
the Giant Rooks because of you guys as well. They're from Berlin, right?
Yeah, they're from Ham. Yeah, they're from Germany.
Yeah, okay, I thought it was Berlin, but yeah. Anyways, they're from Germany. They're kind of like, how would you describe it? You saw them opening for
Milky Chance, yeah.
Milky Chance, right?
And so I saw them open for Milky
Describe them
Chance.
a little bit. How would you describe Giant Rooks?
I describe them. It's like an indie rock, I'd say. So indie rock, they have a lot of pop influence, but they're a little more on the, I'd say a little more on the poppy side. In indie rock,
Yeah.
I'd say. That's what I'd say. But
I listened to a couple songs, Alex.
yeah.
And I kind of honestly, like, the thing I thought of when I listened to it a little bit, just those couple songs, was Imagine Dragons.
Oh,
And
really?
I'm not a big Imagine Dragon fan, and maybe that's not fair. That's just sort of
Yeah.
the reference I had. But yeah, they're definitely like sort of a pop rock. I thought of them kind of like a modern sounding rock band, kind of like
That's, yeah.
like a pop rock band sort of thing.
Is there any songs that stood out to you, Mitch, though, that you liked? Or you said you weren't a huge fan of it, though.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. I liked the other ones. I was surprised because when you texted me Vampire Weekend, I thought, oh God, like just hearing the word
name.
vampire in a band, I thought of Twilight, and I was like, oh God, like what is this, like like a 14-year-old, you know what I mean, like whatever.
Put you on some weird shit, Mitch. Yeah.
It was good. Like I liked it. They had sort of a unique sound. They had I felt like some influence from like even the 70s, like with some of the riffs. Like I looked up like what year they released their albums and that, just because I was curious, because some of the music, like I couldn't really tell sort of like what era they were from, or like what they were influenced by. But I definitely enjoyed Vampire Weekend, which I was surprised by.
Yeah. So Bennett, I'd say Giant Rooks. Listen to Heat Up, All I Know Is Quicksand, and Watershed. I'd say that kind of puts them. That's kind of what Giant Rooks are. So.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think now we can leave it there. Thanks for coming on, Bennett. Another good discussion.
Yeah,
check him out, Bennett Blundell Music on Instagram. Yeah. We'll tag him in the post we make, or the clip we post from this episode. And you've already heard him on an episode from a little while ago, Beatles and Stones. So for sure, check him out on Instagram.
Maybe by the time this gets aired, I might actually finally be able to have some new music out or something, or be
that'd be cool.
Yeah. Bennett, your Beatles and Stone album, that is coming out on Monday. Monday, which should
the album will be kind of, it'll be something to rival Beatles and Stone, maybe top them. You never know.
Who knows?
Top them. But that's for you to decide. We'll include a link when we post the clip. Maybe we'll do it in an episode after you release the album. Is this album, I don't know the name of it yet, better than, you name it, Let It Bleed, Sgt. Pepper's, whatever, any of those albums? But that's for the audience to decide. But we'll leave it there. Bennett, you got to go. Thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Bennett. Yeah.
You
save it for the podcast. That's perfect. What you're talking about. That is absolutely perfect.